Section 44 of The One-Eyed Griffin and Other Tales by Herbert Escott INMAN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Bottle of Smoke. Chapter 3. Curiosity. The ogre was seated on top of a great rock, picking his teeth with a pine branch which he had sharpened into a toothpick. Such an ogre! It was no wonder that the knights did not care to meet him. Why, his head was as big, round as a great cartwheel, and his mouth went right across his face from one ear to the other. His body was covered with skins of the oxen and sheep which he had killed, and his huge hairy arms and legs were bare. By his side was a heavy spiked club, and on his head a steel cap larger than the largest basin you ever saw. He was sitting lazily thinking about this wonderful charm he had heard of, when there came the sound of a voice singing merrily. "Ho, ho," he growled, "here comes some stupid fellow who wants to be eaten." And peering down, he espied the little grey man. "What a shrimp," he thought. "He will hardly make a mouthful. But what is that he is singing?" He listened and heard these words: "Ho, ho, I have the charm. I wonder what it's made of. To keep it here may do it harm. That's what I'm afraid of. Ho, ho, I'd like to know what's inside this bottle. I stole it from the enchanter grave, and—" Just at this moment the singer came in sight and ceased abruptly, for the song had done all the little grey man wanted it to, and had aroused the ogre's curiosity. "Hello, mannikin," he cried. "Do you want to be eaten?" "Indeed, I do not," answered the little fellow, "but I would rather be eaten than stay in the palace and have my head cut off." "Oh, so you have come from the palace. Did you see anything of the enchanter?" "That I did," he chuckled. "Oh, he was a terrible fellow, but not so clever as I." "And did you see his charm?" demanded the ogre. "Oh yes, and what is more, I stole it, and that is why I am here." By this time the ogre was so interested that he had no thought of eating the little grey man. Laying himself flat down so that he could talk at ease, he asked to be told all about the matter. "You must learn," replied the grey man, "that when the enchanter came to the palace, he had this strange bottle, and as I was very curious to ascertain what it contained, I hid behind the curtains and listened while he talked with the king. Thus I discovered that it held a wonderful charm, and could only be opened at the full moon. So when all were asleep, I stole out and ran off with it, and I mean to open it tomorrow night and see what the charm is." He held out the bottle to the ogre, who took it and looked at it curiously. "It's a strange stuff. I wonder what it is. Let us open it at once." "No, no," cried the little grey man in pretended alarm. "I heard the enchanter say it would kill anyone who opened it too soon. You keep the bottle safely, good ogre, and I will come back tomorrow, and then we can open it together." "So be it," replied the ogre, and taking the bottle he hid it safely in his dress, thinking to himself, "I may as well let him live till tomorrow, and open it for me, for then, if the charm is harmful, it will hurt him and not me." As soon as the little grey man had given the bottle to the ogre, he turned and ran off as fast as his legs could carry him, and long before the monster had finished examining it, cunning little fellow was out of sight. Laughing and singing, he journeyed on until he came to a huge griffin lying asleep in the sunlight, when he commenced to cry so loudly that the creature woke up with a start. It growled, jumping up. "Whatever are you making all that noise about?" "Oh, Griffin," he replied, "that horrid ogre has got the charm that I stole from the enchanter, I was going to open it tomorrow night, at full of the moon, and he has taken it." "What is the charm?" demanded the Griffin, and the little man replied, "Oh, it's a wonderful charm, in a great bottle, and I shall never know what it's made of now." "Grrr!" roared the Griffin. "It's like that ogre's impudence to steal the charm when he ought to have given it to his betters. I'll teach him his manners. I mean to have that bottle and see what it contains myself." Then the monster spread his leathery wings, and flying to the ogre's abode, he bit his head clean off, without even stopping to tell him the reason why. So quickly did he do this, that his victim had neither time to defend himself nor inquire the cause of his anger. Then, taking the magic bottle from the dead ogre, the Griffin flew back with it to his den. "I have got it," he cried, but the little grey man was gone. He had waited just long enough to make sure that his plan had succeeded, and then he had started as fast as he could to find the enchanter. This mighty magician lived in a cave high up on the mountain side, and thither, chuckling at his success, hurried the little grey man. "Oh, mighty enchanter!" he cried as he drew near. "Help a poor man who comes to seek your aid." The enchanter paused in the act of stirring a huge cauldron of hissing, bubbling liquid. "In what way do you need my aid?" he said hoarsely. "Alas, I stole the bottle containing the wonderful charm from the magician in the king's palace." "Ah," cried the enchanter, "where is it? I will give you more gold than the king has if you will bring me that charm, for I would fain learn what it is made of. I hear it can only be opened at the full of the moon." "That is so, O mighty enchanter," he replied, "and I meant to open it myself, but alas! the wicked Griffin, after having killed the ogre, who was keeping care of my charm, has carried the bottle to his den, and now I have lost it." "What?" roared the enchanter in a terrible rage. "That Griffin killed my friend the ogre, and stolen the bottle? Oh, I'll soon settle his hash." And thus saying, he picked up his magic wand and strode over to the Griffin's den. "Hocus pocus, not to be spocus, mirabile dictu, 1, 2, 3, he cried, and at the sound of these wonderful words, the poor old Griffin gave a big jump and tumbled over dead before he had even time to ask the enchanter what he wanted, and so the magic bottle again changed hands. As soon as the little grey man saw that the Griffin was dead, he started once more on his travels, and sought the mighty champion. He found the warrior seated in his castle, and drinking nut-brown ale from a huge drinking horn. His helmet was on the table, and his sword and spear by his side. "Hallo, little man, who are you, and what do you want?" he shouted, as he espied the little grey man, and he replied, "Oh, most puissant champion, I am come to seek your aid." "What's the matter with you?" asked the champion. "Alas, I stole the magic bottle and gave it to the ogre, and the Griffin killed the ogre, and the enchanter has killed the Griffin, and so I have lost the wondrous charm I stole from the king's palace." "So, so," cried the champion, "I have heard a good deal about that charm. What is it made of?" "That I cannot say, for it cannot be opened till the full of the moon, and now, alas, I shall never know." "It must be something very wonderful for the enchanter to take so much trouble," said the champion thoughtfully. "Killed the Griffin too. I rather like that Griffin. I tell you what it is, little man. If that old enchanter finds out what the charm is, there will be no doing anything with him. He has been very impertinent of late, and I won't put up with it any longer. I mean to see what that bottle has in it, or I'll know the reason why." He sprang up as he spoke, and taking his great sword, ran to the enchanter's cave, and before the wizard could say, "How do you do?" he gave him such a terrible thwack that his head tumbled splash into the cauldron, and another of the king's enemies was gone. Laughing grimly, the champion took the magic bottle and started home again. "Here, little man," he cried, "I have paid that old fellow out, and brought away your bottle." But the little man had gone, and was hurrying up the mountainside in search of the robber band. End of section 44. Section 45 of The One-Eyed Griffin and Other Tales by Herbert Escott INMAN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Bottle of Smoke, Chapter 4. Opening the Bottle. The way to the robber's cave lay through a dark and gloomy pass, as I think I told you, and along this the little grey man was hastening, when a fierce wolf sprang out, with gleaming fangs and flashing eyes, right in front of him. Most people would have run away as fast as they could, but the little man did nothing of the kind. Taking off his hat, he made a bow, and said, "Good Sir Knight, I am your very humble servant, and much I grieve to see you in this evil state. But I have great pleasure in telling you that Her Royal Highness the Princess has given me command to set you free, and that only 2 out of all the country's evils remain to be overcome, ere you can regain your proper form." At these words the wolf howled mournfully. "Nay, nay, good knight," cried the little grey man, "I understand what you mean. Do I look like the sort of person to marry a princess? Nay, nay, I have arranged for your happiness. So now, let me get this work finished." At this the wolf barked with joy, and pranced off into the wood, leaving the little man free to go on his way. Well, he had not gone far, before a lot of grim robbers rushed down the road and surrounded him. "Money or your life," they cried. "Lack a day, good sirs," answered the little grey man, "I have never a penny of money, and my life is such a little one that I fear it would be of no use to you." At this all the robbers laughed. "Good lack, but you are a funny little man," they cried. "What brings you here?" "That is easily told," he said. "You must know that it was I who stole the magic bottle from the king's palace, and I gave it to the ogre to keep. Then the griffin killed the ogre and took it to his den. Then the enchanter killed the griffin, and now the champion has killed the enchanter, and so I shall never know what the charm is made of." At these words the band gathered closely round the little man, and made him tell all about this magic charm. "Perhaps it will tell us how to make the yellow gold," they cried. "It will be ever so much better than having to rob travellers. At any rate, we will not let the champion keep it, since he has killed our friend the enchanter." Away ran the robbers, and rushing to the champion's home, they fell upon the warrior, and though he fought long and hard, killing many, yet they at last overcame him, and, after cutting off his head, they took all his treasure, together with the magic bottle, and set off to their own abode. "Now, little man," they cried, "here is the magic bottle. Tell us what we have got to do with it." "Well," said he, in reply, "you see there is only one bottle, so only one can open it, and he alone can learn the secret of the charm. Now, which of you is to be the lucky one?" "Me, me, no me, no, no, me," they cried, each more fiercely than the other, with no regard to grammar. "But you can't all do it, so settle which it is to be, and I will tell you how to proceed," he said, though he knew very well that they would never settle it peaceably. "I think," he added, "that he who is the best and bravest should be the one." "That's me." "It is not. It's me." "No, me," they all shouted at once. Then swords and knives were drawn, and they all fell to fighting so fiercely that before long not one was left alive, save the captain, and he was so badly wounded that he fell dead before he could take the bottle out of the little grey man's hands. "Ho, ho, ho!" laughed the little fellow. "That's the end of our enemies, all killed, and without my once using a sword or spear. And here is the bottle, as safe and sound as when I started. Come, Sir Knight, where are you? The charm is broken, and the princess awaits you." As he spoke, a handsome-looking knight entered and shook him warmly by the hand. "Little grey man," he said, "you may not be strong of body, but you are the wisest in the land, and your heart is as noble as that of the greatest peer in our realm." "Oh, for mercy's sake, don't talk of my wisdom, Sir Knight, or I shall never have a day's peace again. Let us hurry back, you to the princess, I to my little grey home, and may we both be happy in the way we like best." While these things were happening, there was great excitement in the palace, for first came news that the ogre was dead. Then someone found the Griffin's body, then the enchanter's, and so sorrow turned to hope, and hope to joy, as tidings came concerning the overthrow of their cruel foes. The news of the champion's death had just arrived, and all the court were rejoicing, when, without a word of warning, in walked the little grey man, as calm as ever, his wonderful bottle still in his hand, and by his side the noble knight, the lover of the princess. The little man walked up to the king, and bowed low to him. "Your Majesty," he said, "the task is done, and the last of your foes is overcome. Moreover, as I have achieved this without aid of mortal weapons, I have broken the spell that bound this noble knight in a wolf's form, and I bring him as the one I choose to marry the princess. That is, if she will have him," he added with a smile. "There is one reason, indeed 2 reasons, why I think this noble knight worthy of the princess," he continued. "Firstly, he alone of all your nobles tried to conquer your foes, and it is better to have tried and failed than not have tried at all. Secondly, he alone of all your subjects has not asked me what my bottle contains." "Hear, hear! Bravo!" cried the courtiers, and the king smiled and replied, "Since you say so, there is none in the land we would sooner see our daughter wed than this same good gentleman. Nay, we suppose he must even be better than we, since we are going to ask a favour of you." "It is granted before it is asked, your Majesty," replied the little grey man. "Then we confess our curiosity, but would fain know this. What does your bottle contain?" Loud and long laughed the little man. "'Tis easily answered, my king. Behold the nature of the wonderful charm." As he spoke, he pulled the stopper from the bottle, and puff! Out curled a little grey smoke. Nothing more, and the bottle was empty. The king looked puzzled. "I do not understand," he said. "There is nothing but smoke. Whence, then, was the charm, and by what have you conquered?" "There was no charm, your Majesty," laughed the little man. "I conquered by the aid of 2 things that must ever destroy those who use them, curiosity and avarice. Led all your enemies to seek to discover what my bottle contained, and each in trying to gain possession of it was destroyed." "Oh, wonderful man!" cried the king, "wiser than any in the land, and more fitted to rule than I am. Stay at court, and you shall be honoured all your days." "No, no, king," said the little man. "Remember our bargain. Princess, give me my key, and take your lover. Your Majesty means well, but I am happier far in my little cot than I should be here, for there I am contented, and that is the greatest blessing man can know. This much I promise. However, that if ever you or your subjects need my poor aid, I will most cheerfully render it, for 'tis our duty to do what we can for others' good." Then the king sent the little grey man home, though he was very sorry to part from him. The princess and her lover were married amidst great pomp and rejoicing, and the whole land became rich and prosperous once more. The little grey man lived in his little grey house, and sang his merry songs from morn till night, and once every month the good princess used to visit him, and with her own hands mend the holes in his coat, and ever after, when people made a great deal of fuss about something that turned out to be of no importance, the folk would laugh and say it was a bottle of smoke. End of section 45. Section 46 of The One-Eyed Griffin and Other Tales by Herbert Escott INMAN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Pixies and the Pollywog, Chapter 1, All About the Pollywog. The Pollywog was hungry, very hungry. That is the beginning of it, and you must remember this, because if it had not been so, the end of my story would perhaps have been quite different, and Wattie and Winnie would most likely have been fried in batter, or made into pickle, or roasted with sweet herbs by the Blue Witch, instead of getting safely home again. Indeed, I cannot say what dreadful things might not have happened to them if it had not been for this. The Pollywog was hungry. But what is a pollywog? Now, if I am to tell my story, you must not interrupt me. What is a pollywog? Why, I thought everybody knew. He is a great monster, with arms and legs and things. He has got some mouths and eyes and horns and ears. But there, surely you know what he is like. And he eats? Oh dear, he eats just the kind of food pollywogs like. Did I ever see him? Well, not until he was shut up in the microscope. What does he do? Dear, dear, I shall never get on with my story. When Ernie sticks out his tongue, it is the pollywog that is hanging on to the end. When Seymour jumps down the stairs and makes his mother frightened, it is the pollywog pushes him. When the boys get fighting, or the girls are quarrelling, it is the pollywog's doings. But there, I must get on. The pollywog was hungry, for the Blue Witch had gone out without giving him his breakfast, and though it was now quite late, she had not come back. He crawled out of the pool of black ink in which he lived, and lay blinking his great eyes and snapping his cruel jaws in an angry manner. The Pixies peeped at him, taking care to keep well out of the way of his ugly arms, and then stole off on tiptoe, speaking in awe-stricken tones, until they were far away from his den, when they flew off, talking eagerly together. "What a great ugly thing he is," cried they, "and how cross he looks! Yes, and how hungry! I really feel quite frightened." "Suppose," said one fat little fellow, "suppose he should crawl over to our dell and begin eating us." And the thought made him turn quite pale. "I really cannot think why the Blue Witch keeps him," added another. "That is not hard to guess. It is because she is such a disagreeable old thing, and likes creatures as horrid as herself." "Yes, yes, that is it," cried all the rest. "It is shameful, and ought not to be allowed." "Well, for my part," said one, bigger and bolder than the rest, "I think we ought to try and stop it." "How can we do that?" they asked in eager tones, and he replied, thoughtfully, "Well, I am not quite sure as to the best way.
but we might go tonight and ask the wise owl. She lives up in the great elm tree, and if we went and inquired very politely of her, perhaps she would tell us the best way." "Bravo! Bravo!" shouted the Pixies, clapping their tiny hands. "That is a splendid thought, and we will go tonight, as soon as our work is done." All this time the Pollywog lay blinking at the setting sun, and wondering how long he was to be kept waiting for his dinner. Now and then he would tickle his right ear with his left hind claw, which was a sure sign that he was getting angry. And no wonder, for I am sure the best-tempered person in the world would grow cross if he was kept all day without anything to eat, and the Pollywog was by no means the best-tempered person. In fact, he was generally quite the opposite. Nobody could do anything with him, except the Blue Witch, and she had to be very careful not to make him cross, or there is no knowing what might have happened. At least, there was no knowing. We know now, because she did not make him cross that night, and something did happen. And what that was, you will see if you read this story through to the end. I cannot tell you what it was now, because this is only the beginning, and all you have to do is to remember what I told you at first, and that is, the Pollywog was hungry. End of section 46. Section 47 of The One-Eyed Griffin and Other Tales by Herbert Escott INMAN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Pixies and the Pollywog, Chapter 2, Wattie and Winnie. Wattie and Winnie lived beside the forest, for their father was a woodman and spent most of his time in the green glades, cutting down the trees and getting them ready for the carters, who came every month to carry the timber away to the far-off town. They could not go to school, of course, for that was much too far away, so every morning they carried their books and slates into the warm sunshine and did the tasks their good mother set them. Very patiently and carefully they worked, for each wanted to win the prize they loved best of all, and which was ready for them every day, their mother's smile and kiss. And then, when lessons were done, off they would run, hand in hand, to wander over the fields or among the great trees that they looked upon as their playfellows. And a happier brother and sister could not be found the wide world o'er than Wattie and Winnie, the woodman's little son and daughter. There was not a flower growing for miles round, but they knew where to find it. Not a nut tree or berry bush, but they discovered it. Not a bird, but they could say where its nest was built. They petted the wild rabbits till the timid creatures would come to their call, while the fawns and deer followed them in their rambles, and ran races with them among the nodding ferns. Brown curly hair, brown laughing eyes, and brown skin, from the tips of their little noses to the end of their little toes, that never had been imprisoned in boots or shoes. Not a creature of the woodlands, but Wattie and Winnie knew all about them. But there were two things they had never heard of. One was the Blue Witch, the other the Pollywog. Now, on the very evening that the Pollywog was waiting for his dinner, the woodman's little children were playing happily, and gathering the nuts and blackberries that grew in profusion all around. The Pixies peeped at them from under the toadstools and beneath the ferns, nodding and laughing to each other quietly as they watched the children play. For the tiny folk dearly loved Wattie and Winnie, as indeed they do all good children, and presently they saw the two stop to watch a great spider that was busily mending its delicate web. "Oh, Wattie, this spider has not finished yet. How tired he must be, for he was hard at work when we first came out." Wattie ran up as his sister spoke. "He ought to have finished sooner," he replied. "Spiders only take about an hour to spin a web. I wonder what has made him so long." Just then a gust of cold easterly wind set all the boughs shaking, and the children saw a great branch of bramble tear all the pretty web down. "Oh dear, what a pity!" they cried, just as the poor spider had finished. And indeed they felt quite sorry for the patient little thing, that began its task all over again, working steadily until it had once more finished its home, when puff came the wind again, and away went the web. "Oh, I must stop that," said Wattie, and catching hold of the bramble branch he broke it off. "There, little spider, now it will not tear down your web any more," he said. The spider paused in its work, and to their great surprise answered them. "Thank you, Wattie, that was very kind of you, for that troublesome branch has given me a lot of work today." Half frightened at this strange experience, the children stood hand in hand, till Wattie mustered courage to say, I did not know that spiders could talk." "Oh yes, indeed," it replied. "We can talk, but you children cannot understand our language." "But I can understand you." "That is because of two things. First, you have tried to help me, and next, I am a fairy spider. Now I am going to help you." "What are you going to do?" asked Winnie. "I am going to fasten a magic web to you." "What?" they cried in some alarm. "Tie us up as you do the bluebottles?" "Oh no," the spider said, "only just one fine thread. That will not hinder your play the least bit." "But what good will it be, please?" asked Wattie. "It will fasten you together so that you cannot be lost, although it may stretch right across the forest. Yet if you put your finger on it and follow its direction, you will be sure to find each other. Besides this, it will have 4 ends that lead to 4 places called anywhere, everywhere, somewhere, and nowhere, so that you can find your way to either of these magic towns whenever you wish to do so." "That will be lovely," said Winnie in delight. "I have often wished to go somewhere." "I should like to go everywhere," remarked Wattie. "All over the world, into the big towns, where the carters take the trees that father fell. If you follow the magic thread, it will lead you there quite safely," said the spider, as it fixed its web round Wattie's waist, and then crawled to his sister. Winnie could hardly prevent giving a little scream as it climbed up her frock, for though she liked the spiders well enough as they sat in the centre of their webs, she did not care about one crawling over her. However, she mastered her fear, not wishing to offend their strange friend by appearing to dislike his presence, and soon the web was also made fast around her also. "There, that will be all right, and though the thread is so fine that you cannot see it, yet it is so strong that nobody can possibly break it. Now, little friends, I must go to bed, for it is getting dusk, and I always get a headache if I stay up late. So good-bye." The spider ceased speaking, and crawled under a broad overhanging leaf, leaving the two children to continue their games until their mother should call them to their supper. But alas! there was to be no supper for them that night, for the Blue Witch was abroad, and it happened that just at that very time she came flying by on the east wind and saw the broken bramble branch. "Ha! What does that mean?" she cried in a rage. "Who has dared break the bramble I put here to prevent the fairy spider building his web? Now he has been able to finish it, and my powerful spell is broken. Mowling Mim, who has done this?" At this question a great black cat jumped out of her pocket, a cat with big blue eyes and a blue tip to his tail that arched his back and clawed and spit as he replied, "Meow, meow, 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 Mowling Mim can tell. Little Wattie broke the branch, Wattie broke the spell. So the spider built his web and is resting now. Little Wattie is his friend. Meow, meow, meow." "Ho, ho!" screamed the witch, shaking her long bony fingers. "So it is a miserable forest child that has been meddling. If I can catch him, I'll pinch him till he is as blue as my nose, and then I'll fry him in batter for my supper tonight." And with these words she sprang onto the wind again, and went sailing round and round at a great rate, till she spied Wattie playing with his sister. With an evil grin on her face, she dug her pointed shoes into the wind to make it blow faster, and darting forward, seized poor Wattie by the hair. "I've got you now," she chuckled. "I'll teach you to break my bramble branches. Oh yes, I'll teach you." Winnie nearly had her breath taken away by the fierce gust that came sweeping round her. She saw an ugly little blue woman suddenly appear and seize Wattie, heard his cry of fear and surprise. Then came another blast, and the blue witch was sailing away far overhead with her poor dear Wattie, and she was left alone. All this time the Pollywog was waiting for his dinner, and he was hungry, very hungry. End of section 47. Section 48 of The One-Eyed Griffin and Other Tales by Herbert Escott INMAN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Pixies and the Pollywog, Chapter 3, all about the Blue Witch. No doubt you will think from what you've already read about her that the Blue Witch was a very unpleasant kind of person. Well, so she was, or else there would have been no need to write this story. She was very ugly, to begin with, and her temper was no better than her looks. She would have been rather tall, were it not that her body was bent round like a letter G, so that her nose was nearly touching her knees. On her back she had a great hump, upon which she used to carry Mowling Mim, her cat. Her nose and chin were both long and pointed, her eyes were sunk deep into her head, her hair fell in thin, snaky coils upon her shoulders, and a scrubby beard bristled below her mouth, while to complete her ugliness she was blue all over, head, hair, hands, clothes, beard, and all. Not a nice blue, like the summer sky, or deep sea, not a light blue, like Cambridge, or a dark blue, like Oxford, but a dull, purply-greeny blue, just as your hands get when the frost nips and chaps them. She lived in the land of the east wind, and I really think it was all because of her that the wind was so disagreeable. But, however that may be, there she lived, all alone, in a very queer-looking house, which I must try and describe to you, as it is the place to which she carried Wattie. Did you ever go to the cheesemonger's? Yes. And did you ever notice the great cheeses before they are cut up? Well, the Blue Witch's house was nothing more or less than a huge cheese set up on end. Hundreds of mice had gnawed out the rooms for her, and eaten a doorway through the rind. The floors, the walls, the ceilings, all were of cheese. So were the tables, the chairs, the bed, and the rest of her furniture, and all of it covered with thick blue mould till it matched the witch in colour. Outside the house was the pool of black ink in which the Pollywog lived. And let me see, I think I told you the Pollywog was hungry. When the Blue Witch had stolen Wattie, she flew off home as fast as she could, and having tied him up so that he could not move, she put him in the coal cellar, and then went out to invite 2 of her friends in to supper. But she quite forgot the Pollywog, who was waiting for his supper outside. Poor Wattie felt terribly bad, shut up in the dark. He was tied so tightly that he could not move, and the cords hurt his hands and wrists. But he was hardly thinking of the pain. He was so glad that the witch had not taken his darling Winnie as well as himself. He had not been there long when he heard the sound of his captor's returning footsteps. Then the door of his prison was opened, and he was dragged out and laid upon the table, while the Blue Witch and 2 others, as ugly as herself, bent over him with cruel eyes, and poked and pinched him with their skinny fingers until he cried out with the pain. "He will be lovely for supper," chuckled one. "Let us get the fire lighted at once." "How shall we cook him?" mumbled another. "Fry him in batter," said the Blue Witch. "No, no," cried the first. "That is not good for supper. It gives you bad dreams. Let us pickle him." "Pickling takes too long," the third said. "Besides, pickle boys are only good for breakfast. We will roast him with sweet herbs." "Then we shall have to wait while we gather the herbs," the Blue Witch grumbled. "And who knows what might happen while we are away?" "Oh, nonsense! What can happen? He's tied up quite safely, and no one can find out where he is." But the witches were wrong about that, for they did not know that Winnie, guided by the magic thread, was at that very moment toiling up the path, with a lot of the Pixies behind her. They did not know that a lot more of the little folk had rushed off to the wise old owl to ask her advice. They did not know that the woodman was coming with his stout axe. No, they knew none of these things, nor that the great Pollywog outside was getting more cross and more hungry every minute. Brave little Winnie! Just for 1 minute after she was left alone, she had a good cry. Then, remembering that the magic thread could guide her to Wattie, she took it between her finger and thumb, and started off as fast as she could go. And, arriving at the great cheese, just as the witches were quarrelling, she pushed open the door and ran boldly in, while the Pixies, having made sure that Wattie was in the Blue Witch's house, ran back to bid their companions hasten up and rescue their little friend. Dear me! What a terrible noise those 3 made when Winnie went in. They screamed, they danced, they clawed the air with rage, because a mortal had found out their home. "How did you get here? What do you want? Who told you the way?" they cried. Winnie stared at them in surprise. Then, catching sight of Wattie lying on the table, she ran across the room and climbed up beside him. "You ugly, wicked things!" she said. "How dare you steal my brother and tie him up like this?" "Ho! Hear, hear!" the witches cried. "It is her brother, and she has come to steal our supper." "Well, she won't do it then," snarled the Blue Witch. "Someone has told her the way, that is plain, but the little stupid seems to have come all alone, and who is frightened of a little chit like that? Here, put them both back in the coal cellar, while we fly round and see if there's any danger, and then we shall have 2 for supper instead of 1. "Ha, ha! 2 for supper instead of 1!" laughed the others, and seizing Winnie, they hurried both her and Wattie back into the cupboard. Then, springing on their besoms, They mounted into the air, circling round and round on the east wind, and looking in every direction to see if there was anyone in sight. They could not see the Pixies, for the tiny folk kept down amongst the grass and toadstools as they ran. They could not see the woodman, for he was still far down in the valley. They could not see the man in the moon, who was watching them through his big telescope. And because they could see nothing, they thought they were quite safe. Yet still they kept flying round for some time to make quite sure, for witches are very cautious kind of people, you know. And all this time the Pollywog was hungry, very hungry. End of section 48. Section 49 of The One-Eyed Griffin and Other Tales by Herbert Escott Inman. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Pixies and the Pollywog, Chapter 4. What the Pixies Did. When the Pixies first saw the Blue Witch steal little Wattie, they were in a terrible way, for they could not tell in the least where she meant to carry him, and she flew so swiftly that no one of them could keep her in sight. They ran this way and that, wringing their little hands in grief, and telling each other the news, until it spread right through the forest, and their king chanced to hear it. Without even staying to put on his crown, the monarch hastened down to his sorrowing subjects. "Where is Winnie?" he cried, as he came up to them, and 100 little fingers pointed to her, as they replied, "There she is, your majesty." "Then some of you follow her," he commanded. "Did not the fairy spider fix his magic web to her?" "Yes, your majesty," they said. "Then she is sure to find where Wattie has been taken. Look, she's starting now. Off you go, and as soon as you have seen where she goes, leave 1 or 2 to keep watch, and the rest of you hasten back to us. You," he continued, turning to another group, "go to the woodman, and tell him to take his axe, and break up the witch's house. Very likely she will carry Wattie straight there. The rest of you come with me to the old owl. We will see if she can give us any advice, for she is wisest of all the forest dwellers." The Pixies dispersed in obedience to their ruler's directions. Those who were bidden seek the woodman, darting through the avenues of trees towards the clearing where he was at work. They found the good man gathering his things together, ready to start for home, and much he wondered to see the tiny people come trooping towards him. "Truly, I must be bewitched," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. "I have often heard of the forest folk, but this is the first time I beheld them." Unheeding his amazement, they ran forward, stretching out their hands and beckoning to him to follow them. "Well, 'tis passing strange. They seem to want me to go with them. What would you with me, ye elfins?" he cried, and they answered, "Woodman, woodman, come, we pray, Wattie has been stolen away. The old Blue Witch has taken him to her home so drear and grim. Bring your axe and quickly come, or much evil may be done. Little Wattie needs your aid. Follow us, nor be afraid." "What, me afraid?" cried the woodman. "Elfins, if my little Wattie is in danger, there is nothing in this world I would not dare meet to rescue him. Lead the way, good elfins, and if stout arms and keen axe are of any use, we will soon have him free once more." "Bravely said!" shouted the Pixies in delight. "The Blue Witch has carried him off, and you must come and smash up her house." "That I will, and her too, if I find her," he replied. "Come, little folk, and show me where she lives." "Follow!" they cried, running on before. "Follow us, and we will show you." And off they set on their errand. Meantime the rest of the Pixies sought the great elm in which dwelt the old owl. She was a very wise bird, and so old that no one knew when she first came there. All day she sat motionless and silent, her eyes fast closed, as though she were asleep. But when the night came, then those eyes would open and grow large and round, till they looked like two lamps shining in her head. Then she would flap her great wings and sail off into the darkness, making the woodlands ring with her shrill hooting. She had just woken up and was getting ready to start when the pixies came swarming up the tree. "Hello! What's the matter now?" she asked. "Oh, ow, ow!" they said. "The Blue Witch has stolen little Wattie, and we don't know where she has taken him, and we want to ask your advice." You don't know where she has taken him. The owl put her head upon one side, and looked very thoughtful for a moment, while the pixies watched her anxiously. "Ha! I have it!" she cried presently. "Just run up to my friend, the man in the moon. He has been looking through his telescope tonight, and must have seen where the witch went to. Yes, that will be best. Go to the man in the moon, and tell him I sent you." "Many thanks, good owl," they cried, and hurried away to the moon. It did not take them very long to get there, for as it was a very light night, all they had to do was to get on to a moonbeam and glide along its smooth surface to their destination. They found the man in no way surprised at their visit. Indeed, he seemed to be expecting them. He was a very grave, learned-looking old gentleman, with a big bald head and a long beard, white as the snow. "Ah," he said, "come along, my friends. I was expecting you. I have been watching the earth through my great telescope, and saw you talking with the owl. Now, what do you want?" "Oh, please, we want to know how best to help Wattie, and how we can conquer the Blue Witch." "That is easily told, but you must help Winnie too, for both the children are tied up in the witch's coal cellar, and she, with two companions, is going to eat them for supper." "Oh dear, oh dear!" cried the pixies in dismay. "Winnie caught too, and both going to be cooked for supper. Oh dear, oh dear!" "Well, well," said the old gentleman kindly, "there is no need to let that trouble you. Listen, the witches are flying round on the east wind, to see if any danger is about, and they have made a big fire ready to cook Wattie and his sister. But they have forgotten to feed the Pollywog, and it is very hungry." "It must be," replied the pixies. "It was mad enough when we looked at it, and that is a long time ago. But how will all this help us?" "In this way. Hurry back and get the woodman to cut a big hole in the back of the cheese house. Then you can help Wattie and Winnie out. But mind, when you have done so, fasten the piece in again very tightly. Do you understand that?" "Yes," they answered. "What next?" "Wait until the witches go in, and then undo the Pollywog's chain," he continued. "Oh!" they cried in dismay. "Why, he will eat us all up." "No, he will not. The big fire in the witch's house is beginning to toast the cheese, and the smell of that will make the Pollywog run straight into the house where the witches are, and then, well, he is very hungry, and 3 witches will not be a very big meal for him." "But when he has eaten the witches, perhaps he will come and eat us," said the pixies doubtfully. "I will see to that," answered the man in the moon. "You will just lie down in front of the fire and go to sleep, and then I will step down and pop him into my big microscope, safe out of harm's way. You have no need to fear. Just hurry back down the moonbeams and set to work, and very soon you will have got rid of the Blue Witch and her cruel companions for good." "Thank you ever so much," cried they, and then jumping onto the moonbeams, they were back at the East Wind's home before anyone knew that they had been away. "Now we must look for the woodman," they whispered. We can do nothing till he has got Wattie and Winnie out." And they crept down to meet him and hurry him on. All this time the Pollywog was waiting for his dinner, and he was hungry, very hungry. End of section 49. Section 50 of The One-Eyed Griffin and Other Tales by Herbert Escott INMAN. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Pixies and the Pollywog. Chapter 5. The Pollywog Gets His Supper. If the Blue Witch and her two ugly companions had not been so excited, they might have noticed what was going on at their feet. But as it was, they gave no thought to danger so close at hand, and kept looking for any foes who might be approaching from a distance. Thus it happened that, while they were circling about overhead, the woodman, attended by the Pixies, was busily engaged cutting a hole in the back of the great cheese. Nor did it take very long for his strong arms and sharp axe to remove a huge piece of the wall, leaving a hole through which he could easily pass. Boldly entering, he saw a sight that made his blood boil and set all the Pixies dancing with rage. Indeed, so angry were they that I verily believe they would have attacked the witch then and there if they could have got at her. Right at the far end of the room, and placed on a high shelf, lay Wattie and Winnie, tied up like fowls ready for roasting. Wattie and Winnie, the merry, happy brother and sister, to be served like that! Oh, if they could only get the witch in their power! They would have loosed half a dozen Pollywogs to punish her. "Oh, Daddy, I knew you would come!" cried Winnie, as she caught sight of her father, while Wattie doubled his fat little fists, and asked with all the fierceness of which his 8 years were capable, where that nasty, horrid old woman was, because he wanted to beat her for tying them up. "She shall be punished, never fear, my boy," replied the woodman, quickly untying the cruel cords and tenderly rubbing the swollen little arms. "She shall be punished for her wickedness, but I must take you out of harm's way first." Picking up his children, he carried them out of the witch's house, and then the Pixies, dragging forward the piece of wall, fixed it firmly into its place again, fastening it so that it could not possibly be moved from the inside. "Now for the Pollywog!" they cried, but their king checked them. "Wait a bit, till the witches come back to their home. See, they are coming back now. Hide, Pixies, hide." Away they all scuttled, crouching under the ferns, crawling behind leaves, and into the shadows, and watching while the Blue Witch and her companions flew down to the house once more. "Come, sisters, it is all right," she said. "There is no one in sight," which was quite true, only she did not know that hundreds of sharp little eyes were watching her. "Come, sisters, let us see about our dainty supper. The fire must be quite ready now, for I can smell the cheese roasting. We must be quick, or it will melt my house down." "We are quite ready, and very hungry," they replied, following her in. "We are very hungry." So was the Pollywog. "Now, Pixies," whispered the king, as the witches disappeared. "Quick, and loose the Pollywog, only keep out of reach of his claws." Away they ran, all fear now forgotten in the desire to punish the Blue Witch. But they were in no danger, for the Pollywog had smelt the toasting cheese, and he was so hungry that he had no thought for anything else, save getting as near the witch's house as his chain would allow him. Straining and tugging, he lay blinking and snapping furiously, all his arms and legs stretched out in the direction he wished to go. Round the ink pond the Pixies ran, and tugging at the chain, soon dragged it from its staple, and the Pollywog was free. Springing up with a bound, he hurried forward as fast as his legs would carry him. He reached the door of the witch's house, paused, gave a sniff at the cheese-scented air, and then, while the pixies held their breath in awe, he dragged himself through the doorway and disappeared, trembling. And in silence they waited, and then there came a long, shrill scream, another and another, and mingling with them the growling of the hungry monster. Then the screams ceased, and they heard a munching and a scrunching and the sound of cracking bones, and they knew the Pollywog was having dinner. And what was happening inside? Oh, terrible things! When the Blue Witch and her companions went in, they ran straight to the coal cellar to fetch Wattie and Winnie. But they were not there. They were gone, clean gone, and not a trace left. They searched high, they searched low, but all in vain. "They must have wriggled off the shelf and rolled away. They can't have gone far. Come and let us look inside," cried the Blue Witch. And she turned to go out, when, in the doorway, his eyes flashing with rage and his jaws snapping in expectation, appeared that terrible, hungry Pollywog. The witches screamed and shrieked. They tried to hide behind each other or creep into dark corners, but it was no use. The Pollywog was hungry, and his long curling claws hooked hold of all three of them. "Oh, oh, oh!" they cried. "Roar, roar, roar!" roared the Pollywog. Snap, snap, snap went the drawers, and they all vanished down his great throat. And then, crawling lazily to the fire, the Pollywog lay down and went to sleep. Then the old man in the moon came sliding down to earth, his great microscope under his arm, and he picked up the sleeping monster and dropped him inside, screwing the top tightly on, and in the microscope he has been ever since. And they broke down the Blue Witch's house and crumbled it all to powder, so that not even a trace of it was left. And if ever you want to see the Pollywog, all you need to do is to scrape some blue mold off the cheese and look at it through the old man's microscope. Or if you can't find that one, any other will do, and there you will see the ugly fellow still crawling about and snapping his jaws, just as he used to do. But there is one thing you must be careful about, and that is that you do not break the vase and fall down the tube on the top of him, or he might eat you as he did the Blue Witch, for the Pollywog is still hungry, very hungry. End of section 50. End of The One-Eyed Griffin and Other Tales by Herbert Escott INMAN.